My name's Bridget Lyle, I'm 32, and I've always been the one holding my family together, paying bills, fixing messes, showing up when no one else does. I'm a software engineer juggling deadlines and family expectations, yet somehow I'm never the favorite. My sister. She's the golden child always stealing the spotlight with her charm, while I'm stuck in the background footing the bill. My parents eat it up pretending we're one big happy family, but I've always been the outsider looking in. At her big graduation party, I thought things might change. Then she smirked, pointed to a folding chair by the trash, and said, "Sorry, this table's for family only." I sat there humiliated until the bill came. $4,500. I had a decision to make, one I knew would shatter my family, but in that moment I also knew there was no other way. If you think that was the breaking point, wait until you see what came next. Stick around, you won't want to miss it. A month ago, my mom called me up, her voice all sugar and charm. She said my sister, the family's pride and joy, was graduating with her MBA from Tulane. They wanted to throw her a big party at a fancy French restaurant in New Orleans, the kind with crystal chandeliers and waiters in bow ties. Mom made it sound like a family effort, but I knew what was coming. "You got this right, Bridget?" she asked, not really asking. I sighed and agreed to cover the costs, renting the private dining room, hiring a jazz trio, even getting Kelly a custom engraved watch as a graduation gift. It wasn't cheap, nearly $3,000 up front, and that was before the catering bill. I spent weeks coordinating everything. I called the restaurant manager to confirm the menu: Creole shrimp beef bourguignon, the works. I booked the jazz trio, a local band with a reputation for setting the mood. I even spent hours picking out that watch, making sure it was something Kelly would flaunt. My inbox was flooded with confirmations and my bank account was taking a hit. Meanwhile, Kelly was too busy basking in her new degree to lift a finger. She sent me a text. "Looks good, sis. Make it perfect." I rolled my eyes but kept going. My parents didn't help either. Dad stayed out of it as usual, saying, "You're good at this stuff, Bridget." Mom just kept calling to add more guests. Her book club, Kelly's professors, some couple called the Lesters, who were parents of Kelly's MBA classmates. The pressure was on. My job as a software engineer was already kicking my butt: late nights, debugging code, early mornings with clients. But family comes first, right? That's what I told myself as I juggled work and party planning. I'd always been the one to step up, whether it was paying for Dad's car repairs or covering Mom's medical bills last year. Kelly, though, she'd breeze in, flash a smile, and get all the praise. I figured this party might be different. Maybe they'd see how much I was putting in. My Aunt Mom's sister warned me not to expect much. "They've always got blinders on for Kelly," she said over coffee one morning. I shrugged it off, but her words stuck with me. The week before the party, I double-checked everything. The restaurant sent me a contract: $4,500 for the catering alone, due at the end of the night. I winced, but figured I'd handle it like always. I told Mom, and she just said, "You're a lifesaver, Bridget." Kelly called once asking if I could add a champagne toast. "Make it classy," she said, like I was her personal assistant. I bit my tongue and added it to the list. My aunt called too, offering to help, but I told her I had it under control. She didn't push, just said, "Don't let them walk all over you, kid." I laughed, but deep down I was starting to feel the weight. The night before the party, I barely slept. I was up late finalizing details, checking the guest list, making sure the gift was wrapped. I kept thinking about what my aunt said about how I always end up carrying the load. I pushed it aside, telling myself this was for Kelly's big day. I wanted it to be perfect, not for her, but because I thought it might finally earn me a seat at the table, figuratively and literally. I had no idea how wrong I was. The night of Kelly's graduation party arrived, and I walked in wearing a navy dress I'd picked out to blend in, carrying the engraved watch I'd spent hours choosing. The private dining room was packed: Kelly's professor's mom's book club, the Lesters, and a dozen others I barely knew. The jazz trio I'd hired played softly, their notes floating over the clink of wine glasses. I scanned the room for my seat, expecting to be near my family. Mom caught my eye and waved me over, her smile wide but fleeting. "Over here, Bridget," she said, pointing vaguely toward the back. I made my way through the crowd, nodding at a few familiar faces. Kelly was at the head table, radiant in a white dress, laughing with her classmates. Dad sat beside her, beaming like she'd just won a Nobel Prize. I figured my seat was with them, but as I approached, Kelly's smile turned sharp. She leaned back, crossed her arms, and said, "Sorry, this table's for family only." Her voice was loud enough for nearby guests to turn. She pointed to a folding table near the service area, tucked between a stack of trays and the kitchen door. A single chair sat there, wobbly and out of place. My stomach dropped. Mom let out a quick laugh like it was a harmless joke. "Oh, Kelly, don't be silly," she said, but she didn't move to stop her. Dad just shrugged his eyes on his wine glass. I stood there, frozen, the watch box heavy in my hands. The Lesters seated nearby exchanged glances but said nothing. I felt every eye in the room on me, or maybe it just seemed that way. My face burned, but I forced my legs to move. I walked to the folding table, set the gift down, and sat. The chair creaked under me, and the smell of kitchen grease hit my nose. The jazz trio kept playing, oblivious. I tried to focus on the party, but it was like watching through a fog. Kelly held court, toasting with champagne I'd added to the menu at her request. Guests fawned over her, congratulating her on her MBA. Mom kept circling the room, playing the proud mother, while Dad stayed glued to Kelly's side. I caught snippets of their chatter, how Kelly was destined for greatness, how she'd land a top job. No one mentioned me, not even a thank you for pulling the night together. I sipped my water, the glass sweaty in my hand, and told myself to stay calm. Aunt Agnes arrived late, her heels clicking as she entered. She spotted me and frowned, her eyes narrowing as she took in my setup. "What's this nonsense?" she muttered loud enough for Mom to hear. Mom rushed over, whispering something I couldn't catch, but Agnes brushed her off. She pulled up a chair from another table and sat beside me, her perfume cutting through the kitchen smells. "You don't belong here, Bridget," she said quietly. I thought she meant the party, but she added, "Not at this sorry excuse for a table." I managed a weak smile, grateful for her presence. The night dragged on. Waiters bustled past my table, balancing trays of Creole shrimp and beef bourguignon. One nearly knocked over my glass, muttering an apology before hurrying off. I watched Kelly open gifts at the head table, her laughter ringing out as she showed off a necklace from Mom and Dad. When she got to my watch, she held it up, briefly said nice, and set it aside without a glance my way. My chest tightened. I'd spent weeks making this night perfect, and here I was, parked by the service door like an afterthought. I kept my head down, picking at my plate, but anger was simmering. Every laugh from the head table felt like a jab. Mom stopped by once, saying, "You okay, honey?" but her eyes were already back on Kelly. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Agnes stayed with me, her silence more comforting than any words. She caught Kelly's eye once and gave her a look that could have stopped traffic, but Kelly just smirked and turned away. I gripped my fork, my knuckles white, wondering how I'd let myself end up here again. As the jazz trio wrapped up their final set, the restaurant manager approached the head table, a leather folder in his hand. The party was winding down, guests sipping their last glasses of champagne, their voices a low hum. I sat at my folding table, still nursing a glass of water, my anger from Kelly's earlier jab simmering but contained. Agnes sat beside me, her sharp eyes scanning the room. The manager cleared his throat, catching Mom's attention. He opened the folder and slid it toward her. "The bill for the evening," he said politely. $4,500 due tonight." Mom's smile faltered. She glanced at Dad, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Kelly, mid-conversation with a professor, barely looked up. The manager weighted his pen, tapping the folder. Mom leaned toward Kelly, whispering something, but Kelly just shrugged her eyes, flicking toward me. I caught her gaze, and for a split second I saw it, the assumption that I'd handle it like always. Mom turned to me, her voice carrying across the room. Bridget, honey, you've got this right. The air felt heavy, every guest's attention shifting my way. My heart pounded, but something inside me snapped. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Not this time, Mom, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. I looked at Kelly, then at the manager, and said, "Not my table." The words hung in the room, sharp and final. Kelly's smile froze. Dad's wineglass paused halfway to his mouth. Mom's eyes widened, her hand clutching the tablecloth. The manager blinked, unsure what to do. "Ma'am," he started, looking at Mom. "The payment is due now." Mom stammered. "But, Bridget, you always—" I cut her off. "I paid for the venue, the band, the watch. $3,000 up front. This one's on you." Gasps rippled through the room. The Lesters seated nearby leaned forward, their faces a mix of shock and curiosity. Kelly laughed nervously, trying to play it off. "Sis, come on, don't make a scene," she said, her voice tight. Agnes stood up beside me, her presence like a wall. "A scene," she said, her tone cutting through Kelly's fake cheer. "You're the one who parked your sister by the kitchen door, Kelly. You don't get to call this a scene." She turned to Mom and Dad. "And you two laughing along like it's nothing, shame on you. Bridget's been carrying this family for years and you treat her like a doormat." The room went silent, the jazz trio's absence making every word echo. Mr. Lester coughed, shifting in his seat while Mrs. Lester whispered something to her husband. Kelly's face turned red. "That's not fair," she snapped, standing up. "This is my night, Agnes. Bridget's just being dramatic." I shook my head, feeling a strange calm. "Dramatic?" I said. "I spent weeks making this perfect for you. I paid for half this party out of my own pocket. And you couldn't even give me a seat at your table." I turned to the manager. "They'll handle the bill. I'm done." I grabbed my purse and the watch box, leaving it unopened on the table. Mom rushed toward me, her voice low and frantic. "Bridget, please, we'll sort this out. Don't embarrass us." I met her eyes, seeing the panic but no real regret. "I'm not the one who's embarrassed," I said. Dad finally spoke, his voice gruff. "Bridget, sit down. We're family." I almost laughed. "Family," I said. "You made it clear where I stand." I nodded at Agnes, who gave me a small, proud smile. The Lesters stood up, Mr. Lester pulling out his wallet. "We'll cover part of it," he said, his voice firm. "But Kelly, this isn't right." Kelly's jaw dropped. "You don't have to," she started, but Mrs. Lester cut her off. "We expected better from you," she said, her tone icy. The other guests murmured, their eyes darting between us. Kelly's professor, who'd been praising her all night, looked away, his face unreadable. Agnes walked with me toward the exit, her hand on my shoulder. "You did good, kid," she whispered. I glanced back one last time. Kelly was arguing with the manager, her voice rising. Mom was pleading with the Lesters, her hands waving. Dad stared at his plate, silent. The laughter that had filled the room earlier was gone, replaced by a tense, awkward hush. I walked out of the restaurant with Agnes, the New Orleans night wrapping around us like a warm blanket. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, my hand steady for the first time that night. Agnes didn't say much as we headed to her car, but her quiet nod told me she approved. Back inside, I could only imagine the chaos unfolding. The Lesters' offer to cover part of the bill had thrown Kelly into a panic, and I wasn't there to clean up her mess. By the time I got home, my voicemail was full. Mom left 3 messages, her voice shifting from pleading to sharp. "Bridget, you can't just walk out like that," she said in the first one. "We need to talk about this." The second was shorter, more desperate. "Honey, please call me back. Kelly's in over her head." The third was clipped, almost angry. "This isn't how family behaves." I deleted them all without responding. My phone lit up again. Kelly this time. Her text read, "Sis, you really screwed me over. Call me." I turned my phone off. The next morning, Agnes called to fill me in. After I left, the restaurant manager had grown impatient, hovering over the head table with the unpaid bill. Kelly tried to charm her way out, flashing her usual smile, but it didn't work. The Lesters, who'd initially offered to help, backed off completely. Mr. Lester had pulled Kelly aside, his voice low but firm. "We thought you were responsible," he told her, according to Agnes. "This kind of behavior doesn't sit well with us." Mrs. Lester had nodded, her disappointment clear. They left shortly after, leaving Kelly to face the $4,500 tab alone. Kelly didn't have that kind of money. Her MBA was funded by loans, and her savings were thin from years of leaning on me for extras, dinners, trips, even her car payments. Agnes said Kelly scrambled to pull out credit cards, her hands shaking as she handed them over. One card got declined, and she had to call a friend to transfer money on the spot. The humiliation was written all over her face. Agnes told me and the other guests, professors, classmates, Mom's book club, watched in awkward silence. Dad stayed quiet, his usual tactic, while Mom tried to smooth things over, telling everyone it was a misunderstanding. No one bought it. By noon, Mom was blowing up my phone again. I let every call go to voicemail, each one sounding more frantic. "Bridget, we're family," she said in one message. "You can't just abandon us like this." I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. For years, I'd been the one bailing them out, from Dad's car repairs to Kelly's shopping sprees. This time, I wasn't budging. I texted Mom once, short and clear. "Handle it yourselves. I'm done." She didn't reply after that, probably too shocked to know what to say. Agnes stopped by my apartment that afternoon, a coffee in hand for each of us. She didn't sugarcoat things. "Kelly's in a hole now," she said, sitting on my couch. "The Lesters were supposed to introduce her to some big-shot recruiter for a corporate job. After last night, they're not so keen." I nodded, sipping my coffee, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. Agnes caught my expression and leaned forward. "Don't you dare feel bad, Bridget," she said. "You gave them everything and they pushed you aside. They're reaping what they sowed." I spent the rest of the day fielding emails from work, trying to focus on my own life. My inbox had a message from one of Kelly's classmates, someone I'd met briefly at the party. She wrote, "I heard what happened. You didn't deserve that. Kelly's been telling everyone you overreacted, but most of us saw through it." I didn't reply, but it felt good to know not everyone was on Kelly's side. Another text came in from Mom later that evening. This one softer. "Can we talk, honey? We didn't mean to hurt you." I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. Words were cheap, and I was tired of their promises. Kelly's calls kept coming over the next few days, each one more desperate. "Sis, I need to borrow some cash," she said in a voicemail. "I'll pay you back, I swear." I didn't call back. I'd heard that line before too many times. Dad sent a single text, "You're breaking your mother's heart." I didn't respond to that either. Agnes was right, they'd taken me for granted for too long, and I wasn't going back. The weight of their expectations was gone, and I wasn't about to pick it up again. A few weeks after the party, my life started to shift in ways I hadn't expected. I'd blocked Mom, Dad, and Kelly's numbers, tired of their voicemails and texts begging for reconciliation. The silence was strange at first, but it gave me room to breathe. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects as a software engineer to keep my mind busy. One evening, while scrolling through my email, I found a message from Agnes with a link to a local news site. The subject line read, "You might want to see this." I clicked the link, and there it was, a piece written by Agnes herself, published in a New Orleans community paper. She didn't name names, but anyone who'd been at the party could connect the dots. The article, titled "Family Values or Family Facade," called out the hypocrisy of those who parade their success while stepping on the ones who lift them up. Agnes described a golden child who'd humiliated her own sister at a lavish event, backed by parents who turned a blind eye. She wrote about the unsung heroes in families, the ones who pay the bills and keep the peace, only to be cast aside. The comments section was flooded. Some praised the honesty, others speculated about who it could be. I knew Kelly would see it, and I knew it would sting. It did more than sting. Agnes called me a few days later to share the fallout. Kelly had been in talks with a top consulting firm, a job the Lesters had helped her land through their connections. The firm's recruiter, a reader of the local paper, had seen Agnes's article and started asking questions. Kelly's classmates, still buzzing about the party, filled in the blanks. The recruiter decided Kelly wasn't a cultural fit, and the offer was pulled. Kelly was devastated, Agnes said, scrambling to apply for lower-tier jobs to cover her mounting debt from the party and her loans. I felt a twinge of pity, but it passed quickly. Kelly had made her choices, and I wasn't responsible for fixing them. Mom and Dad didn't take it well either. Agnes told me they'd been calling her nonstop, demanding she retract the article. "They're embarrassed," she said, her voice dry. "Not sorry, just embarrassed." Mom even showed up at Agnes's house, tearfully claiming I'd torn the family apart. Agnes shut her down, telling her the family had been broken long before I walked away. Dad sent me a letter in the mail, a rare move for him, pleading for me to come to a family dinner to work things out. I read it once, then tossed it in the trash. Their words felt hollow, more about saving face than making amends. Meanwhile, I was building something new. I'd been toying with an idea for a tech startup, a platform to help small businesses manage remote teams. The party had lit a fire under me, not anger, but clarity. I didn't need my family's approval to succeed. I pitched the idea to a former colleague who loved it and offered to co-found the company. We spent weeks drafting plans, meeting investors, and coding prototypes. By the end of the month, we'd secured our first round of funding, enough to quit my day job and go all in. I named the company Anchor, a nod to being my own foundation, not someone else's. Kelly's life kept unraveling. A mutual friend told me she'd moved back in with Mom and Dad, unable to afford her apartment after the job loss. She'd taken a part-time gig at a local cafe, a far cry from the corporate career she'd bragged about. Her social media went quiet, no more posts about her MBA or glamorous nights out. I didn't gloat, I just didn't care anymore. My focus was on Anchor, which was gaining traction faster than I'd hoped. We landed a feature in a tech blog, and suddenly I was the one getting calls from recruiters, not Kelly. Mom tried one last time to reach me, leaving a voicemail through a friend's phone to bypass my block. "Bridget, we're so proud of you," she said, her voice shaky. "Can't we just put this behind us?" I listened, then deleted it. Proud. They'd never said that when I was paying their bills or planning their parties. Agnes backed me up, saying, "They only want you back because you're shining without them." She was right. I'd spent years chasing their approval, but cutting them off showed me I didn't need it. By 3 months post-party, I'd moved to a new apartment closer to Anchor's office. My days were filled with meetings, coding, and building a team that felt more like family than my own ever had. Agnes visited often, bringing her sharp wit and endless stories. She never asked me to forgive my family, and I loved her for it. As for Kelly, Mom, and Dad, they faded into the background, a chapter I'd closed. I wasn't angry anymore, just free. 6 months after the party, I stood in the office of Anchor, my startup, watching my team hustle through a product demo for a new client. The walls were lined with whiteboards scribbled with code and timelines, and the air buzzed with energy. We'd just signed a deal with a chain of local businesses, a milestone that put us on the map in New Orleans' tech scene. I looked out the window at the city skyline, a faint smile on my face. This was my life now, built from scratch, without the weight of my family's expectations dragging me down. I hadn't spoken to Mom, Dad, or Kelly since the night I walked out of the restaurant. Their attempts to reach me had petered out after the first few months, replaced by an eerie quiet. Agnes kept me updated, though I didn't ask for much. She said Mom had stopped hosting her book club, too embarrassed by the whispers that followed Agnes's article. Dad had retreated into his usual silence, avoiding the topic altogether. Kelly, from what I heard, was still at the cafe, picking up extra shifts to chip away at her debt. I didn't check her social media or ask for details. That part of my life was over, and I'd made peace with it. Looking back, the party was a turning point, but not in the way I'd expected. When Kelly told me, Sorry, this table's for family only. It wasn't just a jab, it was a mirror. It showed me how I'd let myself be pushed aside not just that night, but for years. I'd spent so long trying to prove my worth to people who didn't see it, thinking if I gave enough, paid enough, did enough, they'd finally value me. But standing up that night saying, "Not my table," wasn't just about the bill. It was about choosing myself. The biggest lesson I learned wasn't about revenge or proving them wrong. It was about boundaries. I realized family isn't a blank check you keep writing no matter how much it costs you. It's okay to walk away from people who take you for granted, even if they share your blood. Agnes taught me that not with words, but by standing by me when I needed it most. She was my family now, not because of obligation, but because of respect. My team at Anchor was too. They believed in me not because of what I could do for them, but because of what we could build together. There were moments I doubted myself. Late at night when the office was empty, I'd wonder if I'd been too harsh, if I should have given Mom or Kelly one more chance. But then I'd remember the folding table, the laughter, the years of being the one who always said yes. I wasn't that person anymore. Anchor wasn't just a company, it was proof I could stand on my own. Every contract we signed, every feature we launched, reminded me I didn't need their approval to thrive. I don't know if Kelly or my parents ever learned their lesson. Maybe they blamed me, maybe they moved on. It didn't matter. My life wasn't about them anymore. I'd found my own table, one where I belonged, surrounded by people who saw my worth. I wasn't angry or bitter, I was grateful. Grateful for the clarity that night gave me, for the courage to walk away, and for the chance to build something better. To everyone who's listened to my story, thank you for sticking with me to the end. It's not just about one party or one fight, it's about knowing your worth and standing up for it. If this hit home for you, hit that subscribe button and join me for more stories about finding your place, no matter who tries to push you out. Your support means the world, and I can't wait to share more with you.